Welcome to the Studio Success Formula Podcast, the business school for dance studio owners. And now for your host, Clint Salter.
Hey there, dance studio owners. It's Clint here from the Studio Success Formula Podcast. Today we've got a really special guest on the show. I think I say that all the time, but we do. I love to bring you special guests. I love to bring you people that I know that are going to help you to grow your business. You as a studio owner, you as an individual, anything to do with growth and learning, I'm super excited to bring you. And this guest today is someone that I didn't just randomly find online. I've actually had the great pleasure of being in a room with them and having dinner with them and conversations with them about our topic today. And our topic today is really around building your team. So, and you would have heard us talk about building your team before, but I love bringing on different people with different ways of working, different ways of recruiting, different ways of communicating. And this guest today, when I listened to her, I spent a couple of days with her last year and I was blown away. And what she taught me has really changed our business, especially around our team inside of our business. Now, we have a few people that work for us that are full-time employees, and we have lots of contractors as well. And so we're continually building, recruiting new people. And that's what you need to be doing in your dance studio as well, because as I've talked about before, you can't build that dream dance studio just with you doing everything, because there's only 24 hours a day and you don't want to be working 24 hours a day. You definitely don't want to be spending your productive time on those tasks like bookkeeping, like invoicing, like responding to those, emails with those, frequently asked questions that people are asking, with, organizing, venues maybe for your recital or anything around logistics or admin. We definitely want you to be delegating those tasks to other people. And so my guest today is the amazing Hyman Pratt. And Annie is a real expert in leadership. She has built up some massive companies. She's worked with small businesses, entrepreneurs, really around leadership. And she's renowned for her outcome-focused and team-centered leadership approach. She loves people, but she's also direct and has worked with many leaders. So know what it takes and the skills you need and the qualities you need to be an effective leader in your dance studio. Now, this is definitely for you if you're tired of doing everything yourself. If that's you, you definitely have to listen to this episode. It's also you if you've been going a little while and you might have a few teachers, maybe you've got one admin staff, but you still feel like you need help. Or maybe you've got staff currently, maybe someone in the office or some teachers that you feel like could be more productive or more invested, or you could engage with them better in the business. Or maybe they're not just performing the way that you want them to. If you're kind of going, yes, Clint, that's me, then this episode is for you. I could have talked to Annie for hours and hours, which you'll hear me say in this, but she really does drill down into what makes a team work, what you need to look for before you actually hire someone, and that process of once you've hired them, then what do you do? We really get into those details. I know that you're absolutely going to love this episode with Annie, and I hope you take lots of notes and get a lot of value out of it, because by the end of this, I want you to feel calmer around the hiring process and also calmer around having to have those tough conversations with your staff as well. So enough from me. Enjoy this episode. Hope you love it. And I'll see you again really soon. Bye for now. Hey there, dance studio owners. It's Clint Salter here from the Studio Success Formula Podcast. And thanks for joining us on today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about the heart and soul of your dance studio, your team. And I've invited an expert leadership consultant, Hyman Pratt, to talk with us on this very valuable topic. And you know that I love it because I talk about it all the time. So I was like, let's bring on an expert who can really dive deep with you today on really building your dream team. Because I know as studio owners, we think we can do everything ourselves and we wear 100 hats in our business, but we just can't really build that studio that we want to without surrounding ourselves with great people. Now, our guest, Annie, is renowned for her outcome-focused and team-centered leadership approach and has inspired many companies to grow, reorganize, and reach their greatest performance potential. Annie is a partner and the executive consultant with Impact Business Execution Systems. Hello, Annie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
No problem. Hey, Annie, I'd love for you to start by telling our studio owners a little bit about what you do with your clients today to help them build amazing teams.
Sure. Yeah. So day to day, I help companies develop their leaders and teams to be a lot more proactive, capable, and accountable for driving results. And I do this by helping them create an environment where everyone can really depend on each other to take action consistent with getting the results that they're looking for. And what I do that helps with that is creating a culture of demonstrated behaviors. They're the behaviors that really demonstrate your company's values and what everybody needs, how they need to behave to be most effective with each other to reach those results.
It sounds good. And I'm sure our studio owners are thinking, yes, we want those team members in our business. I mean, I guess for our studio owners, Annie, one of the things that they initially struggle with is I need help in my business, but that's all I can kind of identify. I just need someone to help me because I'm busy. And so what are some steps you can give us around identifying who it actually is that you need to bring into your business to help you grow?
The first thing is that you need to think about your business in terms of its functions, kind of distinct functions. So for a studio, I'm imagining that you have a teaching function, that you have an office management function, that you have maybe a recruiting or a marketing and development function, right, to bring in more students.
Yeah.
So you first start by thinking about the functions in your business, not just the people that are doing work, but kind of, how the work lays out. Then with those functions, you want to think about which are the most important to drive the top line of the business, right? The revenue and the excellence of the program and the profits. So then you can think about what is on your plate. So that's the first thing, to think about which functions just need a lot of help and could really make a difference either in my top line or my bottom line. Then you also want to think about what's on your plate as the studio owner. That is a task or a function that you shouldn't be involved in any longer because it doesn't drive your business. And try to get yourself replaced in those first. So if you have a function that also shouldn't be on your plate, that's a really good place to think about, can I hire somebody to take that part over?
Yeah, I love that because, I know that our studio owners say to me, Clint, I'm doing so much, they're doing the bookkeeping, they're doing the admin. Yes. And I think, and bookkeeping and kind of that admin side of things, for me and what I've done with our studio owners is one of the first things that you can essentially, delegate and bring someone else on board that is an expert in that.
Yes. Absolutely. And it frees you up then to focus on the things that really drive your business, like the marketing side and maybe finding and developing your teaching staff. I don't know what drives your business, but I'm thinking that those things are incredibly important. And so getting the administrative function buttoned down and not needing your support is actually key to you growing your business.
Totally. Look, it sounds like you own a dance studio, Annie.
Dance studio, but other businesses for sure.
That's right. I mean, look, at the end of the day, so much of it is transferable, right?
Yes. And I did work with a small university. I mean, it's different, but it's, they've got students too and teaching staff. Yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds very similar, and lots of admin, which,
yes, exactly.
Our studio owners do. Although we're getting them onto more, using technology a lot better in their business. So they're not shuffling around Post-it notes and envelopes with money in them, which is exciting.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Annie, some of our studio owners would say, look, Clint, I just don't have the money to employ someone. What's your answer when you're working with business owners? And I'm sure they can be small and large businesses where for some reason they can't justify, bringing someone on board in a particular role, although you can see that it would hugely benefit them and grow the business.
Yeah. So a couple things about that. One, even if they can't afford to bring on somebody right away, I still encourage business owners to get more understanding, again, about those business functions and what's needed. Because when you can understand the problem and the whole picture better, then you can find the how do you call it? The opportunistic solutions can come your way more easily. So if you understand, here's the type of administrative support I need, I'll just extend the example that we were talking about, but I can't really hire this person today. But if I could hire them, I know that these are the things I'd need for them to be doing. To just start there, because then you may come across somebody, maybe a student intern or somebody who needs a very small part-time job or is willing to learn for a while before they take a larger, a meaningful pay. You can attract solutions to yourself that you may not be able to if you don't really understand what you're looking for first. So defining that is super, super important, even if you can't hire it yet. Because the second that you can, you'll know what you need. I know in some, for example, in the small university that I worked with, they had some students who were very interested in learning more about the business, so to speak. And they had quite a bit of volunteer labor that just helped, 3, 5, 10 hours a week and not more. And we're really happy to learn some things and came with some good experience because they have, they've had jobs before. So, yeah. So maybe starting there. And then the second thing that I would say is is to focus on, it's always interesting with a small business, especially like a dance studio, in that the thing these owners need to mind first is that revenue piece, right? It's like, how's my revenue doing? But also understanding the rest of the business model so that an owner can be confident that when I'm going out for the revenue, that I'm confident that this money is profitable, that it does get to the bottom line. Because the last thing I wanted is for these business owners to be working on businesses that have not enough margin in their business model. Maybe I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
And that's something that can only be discovered if you're really willing to look at it again. So again, starting with understanding, and I imagine that's an area that you help business owners with a lot, because just looking at it is the first step, being willing to look at it.
Totally. And for our studio owners who are heavy right-brainers, highly creative, technicians essentially, a lot of them got into the business because they were dance teachers and super passionate. That was me. And then opened a dance studio, super passionate for about 6 months. And then you're like, oh my God, finances, marketing, staff. You're like, I didn't sign up for this.
Absolutely.
And so, a big thing. And I loved what you just said then about, being prepared, actually looking at those numbers. And you're right, we talk a lot about, class capacities and forecasts. And one simple exercise we do is like, okay, write down, we're going to look at every single class, how many students you have, how many you could have, your expenses, your income, and then your potential income. If you increase the numbers in that class, what does that look like? And they're like, oh my goodness, it looks it looks amazing. I've never looked at my business this way.
Yes. Wonderful.
So totally with you. And I love that, you have such a strong finance background as well, which is, which is very valuable, I think, when looking at building a team, because
it is.
I've done it. Our studio owners do it as well when they're wanting to recruit and they know they've got to get it off their plate, but they go, well, this is kind of a cost center. This is, isn't directly bringing me in income, but it's keeping my current customers happy. So that's linked to retention, which is highly valuable. But no, I loved what you shared there. And I'd love to know, what are some of the mistakes? So when you see businesses that are about to hire for a position or they want to recruit for a position, what are some of the mistakes that they make early on that you've seen continually? I just want to try and help our studio owners out by not making them. There's
a few mistakes. So let's talk about like kind of pre-hiring and then post-hiring. So let me start with I'll just start kind of backwards with the post-hiring. So the work that you get from somebody in the first month or so, especially with their natural behaviors, like that is a time that every owner should consider to be a probationary period. Because what you're going to find in that 30 days for people's natural behaviors, those are as good as it's going to get. meaning that if you have a lot of trouble, if you have somebody that right away has a lot of what I call victim behaviors, so meaning they make a lot of excuses, maybe they're late a lot, they have a tendency to be overly confused, they have I think I mentioned kind of excuses. They aren't being very proactive about wanting to know what they should be doing and how they're doing. If you are seeing a lot of behaviors, kind of red flag behaviors that you're thinking, oh, that's not good. I want everybody to understand if you're thinking that in the first 30 days, after 90 days or 6 months, you're going to be really upset that you still have this person. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see is people thinking, well, maybe they're not getting enough support. I know that, I don't have a lot of structure in my company, and maybe it's really my fault that they're not doing well in the first 30 days. But don't worry so much about their performance in the first 30 days. Worry about their behavior. What do they do when they don't know what to do? What do they do? Do they do something productive? Or do they do something unproductive, like just sit around and do nothing and wait for you to give more instruction? Because you want people on your team who are naturally proactive, right? Naturally reach out to be more accountable. Naturally try to understand what they should be doing. Take action on their own. You want to look for those behaviors. Okay, so that's post-hiring. Pre-hiring, the biggest mistake that I see entrepreneurs make in hiring is not doing behavioral interviewing. Behavioral interviewing is so important. It's there's a quote that I've heard many times now that basically says people get hired for skill and fired for behavior. So you've got to hire for both skill and behavior. And when I say behavior, I also include attitudes in those buckets. I'm imagining that I know in the academic world, but I'm imagining in the dance studio world too, that really amazing performers might even be good technical teachers, but if they have a really tough attitude that kind of tanks the whole rest of the program, that might be something that you can't tolerate. And you'll want to be asking behavioral questions during upfront to find out if those behaviors are likely there, if those difficult behaviors are likely there. And the way you do that is by asking questions about their past, about how they behaved in the past. So a question might sound something like this. If you were interviewing a dance studio teacher, maybe tell me about a time when you were working with a class that had some students that were extremely difficult. What did you do? How did you handle it? And how did it turn out? What did you do in the future? Who did you talk about it with? Right? And in that kind of a question, you give somebody the opportunity to say what they actually did, and they might come out with what they did that's just not even close to what you're looking for. It might be that they say, I kicked him out of the class. I just gave him one warning and then I sent him packing. And with that, you might be thinking, oh, no, there's lots of steps that happen before that, right?
Totally.
So you want to be asking those kinds of questions. Another really good behavioral interviewing questions is, tell me about a time when you had a difference of opinion or a conflict with your supervisor or the studio owner, where you saw things differently or you didn't like how a decision was made. What did you do? What was the circumstance? Tell me all about the circumstance. What did you do and how did it turn out? Because there's going to be lots of times when an owner makes a decision that is hard, that maybe isn't the rest of the staff's first choice. And you want to hire somebody who is willing to try to get an understanding of why they make those decisions and who can work with it. Mm-hmm. Right? So because if somebody says, well, I had a difference of opinion and I basically just, told my owner that that I don't agree and I'll do it if I have to, but whatever. Like that's not the kind of answer you want.
No, definitely not. No, I love that you're sharing this because you and I spent some time together in October of last year, and one of the big takeaways I received was around this behavioral interview style for hiring new positions, and we've done it and it has just been a game changer. Just that little thing of kind of not knowing how to interview really, going to having some structure, more importantly knowing what to look for and why you're asking those questions has just been awesome. Annie, what's your take on types of testing as well? So, personality test, Colby, Strength Finder. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, you know what? I like them and I think that they're additive. So, but I think it's they're great in conjunction with behavioral interviewing. They're very much strengths based mostly. Out of all those assessments, I actually really like the DISC. To me, it's the most. Even though it's an older assessment, it helps with really making sure that you have a good fit for a particular role. Right. So one of the things about the DISC assessment, in the DISC assessment, I'm a high C. So a high C stands for conscientious, but I actually think originally 20 years ago it stood for compliance, but nobody liked that label. So what a high C is somebody who needs to be very accurate. So if you're hiring somebody in an administrative position, you want somebody who's pretty high on that C scale. If they have a C that's super low, even if they're saying, hey, I'm detail oriented, I'd want to explore that further. Because I've never seen somebody who's a low C that was really good with detail.
Yes.
So I like them. And at the same time though, then you in a behavioral interview, you can ask questions that help back that up. So it's if I'll go back to that example with a C, for somebody being a lower C who is interviewing for an administrative position, I might ask a question of, tell me about a time when you got feedback about a task or a project that you were doing that somebody gave you corrective feedback. What was it? How did you respond? How did it turn out? Tell me what some supervisors have asked you to improve in your past. What kinds of things do you know you need to improve? And that combination of an assessment and behavioral interviewing can be super effective.
I agree. I want to touch on something, and that's expectations. When you bring someone new into the studio, and I see this quite a lot, is that the studio owner and the staff member are not on the same page because there isn't an agreement on the expectations of that position. So quite quickly within those 30 days you talked about, one person, the teacher, for instance, thinks they're doing a good job. The studio owner thinks they're not doing a very good job. Neither of them really talk about it. And it ends up with the studio owner building up a big story in their head about how this person isn't right, and it ends in disaster. So how important are, setting those expectations up front, and what can we do during those 30 days, whether it's a chat, if they're a casual teacher once a week, or what can we put in place to ensure that the communication is open and no one's kind of running, flying blind essentially?
Yeah, perfect. Right. So there's a couple things. And one, even as you were talking, one of the things you alluded to is having structure in place for that communication. So that's the first thing, is like, you can't leave it up to chance that you're going to talk to your new employee, or they're going to come talk to you. So it's like, we're going to have a weekly check-in, or maybe a bi-weekly check-in. And here's the kinds of things that we're going to cover in the check-in. And that right away, that offers a degree of safety for the new team member, and that they're going to have a place where they can bring their questions. And you're going to be very direct up front, saying, this is what we're going to cover in that communication. We're going to talk about how the past week went. How was I as a supervisor in giving you clear direction? What kinds of things came up that you were wondering about? What should I be doing? And then I'm going to share with you the kinds of things that I saw either in behavior or in your performance that I'm thinking might need improvement, or to give you really positive feedback too. You want to be giving both. But to be very direct with saying, hey, this is how it goes here. Like, we openly communicate. That part isn't up for lack of compliance. This is what we do here. This is how we behave here. And we rely on each other to give each other good feedback openly. And then you have those meetings, and you're able to, it takes some practice to be able to articulate what kind of behaviors you want. But when you know about the behaviors you don't want, then you just need to start thinking about, well, what is it that I do want? Because that's going to be the thing that's more important to articulate. So it's like, let's say that you have a new dance teacher and you want them to be more proactive about their downtime, meaning that you don't want to see them, just doing nothing between classes. Right, you might be thinking that a new person in there, they just finished a class went fine, but now they're just hanging out. So then you need to think about, gosh, I don't want them hanging out, but what do I want them doing? And be very specific about that. Then the feedback sounds something like, hey, this, before we start here, I'm so glad we're meeting, and I want to give you a little bit of feedback. And I want you to know that this is all in the interest of just getting us on track and making sure that you have a really good way to be successful here. So I always start with a positive intention.
I think that's important, and something that our studio owners struggle with is, having the conversation first, where there's something they see as constructive feedback, or they might view it as being negative, or I don't want to upset that person. And because a studio environment is highly emotional on all fronts. Parents, students, teachers, studio owner. It's a highly emotional place. And so for a studio owner, and I've had lots of conversations with our members and our mastermind group members as well around, having those tougher conversations, with people because what happens is, and I said before, it builds up, and then you haven't said anything, and now every little thing that they do annoys you, and you get to the point where you just want to explode.
Yeah. And it's actually pretty unfair to the new person as well, because they don't have a chance to change the future without feedback. They just don't have a chance. And so beginning with, I will say that beginning with a positive intention and staying compassionate is really going to help give feedback. And then you can say what you don't want, but then immediately go to what you do want. Here's what doesn't work for me, but here's what would work. I would love it if you would, right after a class, come find me about what you can do next. Or if you could, jump on the roster and start planning the next class and put the notes in the file. I mean, I don't know what your systems are, but just being really specific about what you do want. And then in those meetings also very much acknowledging and appreciating the behaviors that they are doing that are really good, right? So when you see them go out of their way to help a struggling student, for example, definitely give both types of feedback.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I always tell the story of when I was teaching a studio owner coming in and viewing like the last 10 minutes of my class, and I was quite young, and she came up to me and said, look, I loved how you did that, and, working with that, one of those students, it was super good. Next time, I'd love you to work on X, Y, Z, whatever it was.
Yes.
And then she goes, but I was so happy, to kind of see the progression of this class, congratulations. And that sticks in my mind, that experience. Because firstly, her just coming in and watching 10 minutes of my class was like amazing.
Yes.
And then giving me feedback to say, this was really good and here's an opportunity for you to grow, was amazing.
Totally. Yep. And that's, Clint, as a person on the receiving end of that, that's what I want your studio owners to take home, how appreciative you were. Think if she didn't give you the feedback. Like, again, you have so little chance to actually change the future. It's like, what? You have to evaluating your own performance is actually really hard. Right? I mean, that's why you've got teachers and supervisors and coaches and all that. Yeah. So just, having some courage to go ahead and change the environment. And I think that you need two things, the structure and the behavior. So the structure is the way to not chicken out. So it's like, we're going to have this weekly meeting. And these are the things we're going to talk about. That right away sets you up for success. Because if you put something in there that where you actually have to get up the courage to give the feedback, if you don't have the mechanism set up in advance, then you're putting a giant barrier against you and the other person to be able to actually have those conversations. So go ahead and structure those in. It helps so much. And then when you get really good at it, then you'll see that you get practiced in giving feedback. Then you can give it on the fly so much easier. But if you're not practiced, you got to set up the structure so that you actually get to practice.
I love this. And I love that you're talking about practice, because I think a lot of people go into it. Our studio owners might go in and go, I'm not saying this right, or this isn't the right way, or, and so then they kind of don't say anything at all. But you're basically giving permission there.
Yeah, it's like, well, that would be like me saying, I don't know how to do a proper turn, but I'm not even going to try, or I'm not going to go to class, or I'm not going to, give it a try. So yeah,
exactly. I think that's a great point. Think about what we're asking of our students that come to us and kind of, walk that path as well. And a lot of our studio owners end up with staff that don't work for them, which you talked about, when people don't work. What's some advice? Let's say it's been 30 days. In some cases, it's been 5 years, and they've got an office manager still in the office that, is doesn't like change. I get this all the time. But Clint, I had one person say to me once, oh no, our office staff member won't do emails. She refuses to do emails.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I was like, how long has she been with the business? She'd been there over 5 years, and she was like, I don't do emails. And I was like, that's a little bit of a problem, because they are your admin staff. But letting go of a staff member is a challenging one. So what's some advice you can give us if there's someone that's not working, and we clearly know they're not working, but we feel bad if we let them go? I mean, that's not great for the business, obviously. How can we, how do we go about that?
Yeah. A couple things. One is to remember that if it's not good for your business, it's also not good for them. Like, it really isn't about the company against the team member. It's about the fit. And when somebody doesn't fit well and can't perform well in their role, I mean, that's not just painful for the business. That's actually super painful for the team member. I mean, think about the times that you yourself have been in a situation where you can't generate results, or you're constantly knowing that you're underperforming. It's like it's not a good place. And so the longer you keep them on, the more you delay them from finding a place that is a good fit, or from having a change that actually is a catalyst for them to change. Behavior change is hard. And sometimes we need a bigger catalyst than just some feedback, right? I mean, I can think of times in my life when people asked me to change behavior and I thought, well, I don't really need to do that. And then some bigger event happened, and then it was like, oh yeah, I guess I need to change that.
Yeah, I'm sure we can all identify with those situations.
Yeah, so it's really it's two sides. I mean, you if they're not helping the business and they're really deleveraging the whole team and causing and have too much of your mind share, because that's the other thing as an entrepreneur, you need to protect where your energy and your focus and your thoughts are going. If you're spending a lot of time on figuring out how to, what to do about a team member that's not working, it's like, make the change and just move on. Mm-hmm. And for making that change, to have having the discussion, one of the ways that you can help yourself in having that discussion is to, one, be compassionate, that just, this is going to be really hard, and to even start with that. Look, I need to have a discussion with you about your role in your future here, and this is really hard for me. I really appreciate so many of the things that you've done over the last, 2 or 3 or 5 years or 5 months or whatever it is. And at the same time, this part of the performance just isn't working. It's not working, and I'm going to need to let you go. And then there's one additional thing that you can do, I think, that helps a lot. And that is if you can contribute something to their future. So it might be something like, hey, if you want a reference for the things that I appreciated about your role, I'm happy to do that. If you want to offer an introduction to somebody, great. I know one person who had one of their other team members coach them on finding their have 2 coaching sessions to help them spruce up their resume and get back out on the market. If you have something to offer, that can really help. And they don't even always take you up on the offer. But if you have something that you can contribute to their future, it certainly, I think, helps having that discussion.
So powerful. And I feel like as our studio owners are listening, they've just taken like this big breath of like, that feels not as difficult as I thought it would be. I mean, it's always a difficult process, but I think having some structure around it as well is making the process a little bit easier.
Absolutely. A structure always makes it easier, right? And in fact, there's even a principle in psychology that the more structure and process you have, the less emotional things become. So it's, that's something that therapists learn early on. Yeah. That when you have, right? I don't know if anybody here has been in therapy before, but I have.
Yes, and, always. I mean, look, I think it's one of the most important things as a business owner that you can do is, to talk to someone that isn't so connected and involved in your life.
Absolutely.
So important.
And when they have led me through a process of, talking about an issue or even communicating with somebody else, the emotions do come down because you have a way better chance of staying in your thinking brain, not in the fight or flight or freeze brain, not in the emotionally reactive part, So, so having some structure helps a ton. One last thing I would like to add about that too is when you're going to let somebody go, it's very, very few times when they don't actually know that it's coming. They know they're not doing well. So it can be very much a relief for everybody.
Yes. Totally. Thank you so much. I literally could talk to you all day, but I know we're running out of time. So I'd love to wrap up, Annie, and just ask you, you've grown businesses, you've worked with so many successful business owners. From all of the great work that you've done with these amazing people, what would you say are the three things that you've noticed within business owners that have success, not only in their business, but in their life as well? What would kind of those three things be?
Yeah. Especially in business, that one of the first things is to really know your business model and to articulate concrete goals. Even for areas that aren't about the numbers. Have just a really clear articulation of what you're going for, because then people can get there. The second thing is really developing those habits of behavior. Right, is the way that people interact in your company that works. Open communication is one. Another classic behavior is when people come across a problem that they need to raise it immediately and get support. Having those kinds of collective behaviors are super, super important to your business success. Super important. And behavior is probably one of the most misunderstood things in business. And then the last thing is to help with getting those great behaviors going and people stepping up and being a lot more accountable for results, you've got to provide a psychological safety. And that means really staying away from blame, criticism, and judgment.
Those things that we can slip into quite easily. Yes, right. Instead of focusing, earlier when I talked about when you give feedback, you want to give the feedback of what went wrong and what you don't want, but you also then need to give the feedback right away of what you do want. And if you add in blame, criticism, and judgment into that process, people, they can't change. They become super defensive. They worry about, they go into that, fight or flight brain. So you need to be able to learn how to give feedback and respond and interact with people in a way that's free of blame, criticism, and judgment. And if you're scared, say so. If you're frustrated, say so. But don't go to a place of that telling your team members that you've caused you've caused my business to tank, because it's, first of all, it's not true. And second of all, it won't help. And I know in the moment, we can, and I've identified that in myself with my team members as well, is that in that moment it can be highly charged.
Yes.
And I know it's with our studio owners, whether it's a big recital number and there's a deadline not met and they've got to perform it the next week and the routine's only half done. I mean, that's probably a great example of when there's a lot of emotion and there's a lot of finger pointing.
Yes, there is, right. And when you slip into that, because we're human, it does happen. No problem. Just go back and clean it up. Go back and say, hey, I'm sorry. That was a lot of blame and finger pointing. Let's talk about how we get it back on track. Because I am sorry and I'm scared of how this is really going to go. What can we do to get it back on track?
Yep. Agree. Oh, Annie, thank you so much. I mean,
You're so welcome.
This is so awesome, and I'm super excited for our studio owners. I'm sure they're taking a lot of pages of notes and are like, I want to build a team. I'm sure this has got them excited as well and not scared around, building the team that they want and surrounding themselves with amazing people, because it's possible.
It is. Absolutely, it's possible.
Awesome. Annie, where can our studio owners go for more information about what you do?
Yeah, they can go to our Impact website. Soon I will have an Impact Entrepreneur website, but for now they can go to our Impact website, and that's at impaqcorp.com.
Perfect. Awesome. And we'll put other links in the show notes as well. Thanks again, Annie. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you enjoying the Studio Success Formula podcast? Then we'd love for you to share the love. We want to help more dance studio owners become go-to studios, so we'd greatly appreciate you writing us a review on iTunes. For taking the time out to do so, every month, Clint will be selecting one lucky dance studio owner to receive a Power Business Coaching session. Simply visit the iTunes store today, search for Studio Success Formula, click on ratings and reviews, and then write your review. Thanks in advance. Take care, and we'll see you next time.